Light fighters are fighter aircraft towards the low end of the practical range of weight, cost, and complexity over which fighters are fielded. The term lightweight fighter is more commonly used in the modern literature, and by example tends to imply somewhat more capable aircraft than light fighters at the lower practical ranges, but the terms overlap and are sometimes used interchangeably. Whatever term is used, the concept is to be on the generally lower half of the practical range, but still with carefully selected competitive features, in order to project highly effective force per unit of budget via an efficient design. As well-designed lightweight fighters have proven able to match or beat heavier aircraft plane for many missions, and to significantly excel them in budgetary efficiency, lightweight fighters have proven to be a strategically valuable concept. Attempting to scale this efficiency to still lower cost, some manufacturers have in recent years adopted the term light fighter to also refer to light primarily air-to-ground attack aircraft, some of which are modified trainer designs. A key design goal of lightweight fighter design is to satisfy standard air-to-air fighter effectiveness requirements. These criteria, in order of importance, are the ability to benefit from the element of surprise, to have numerical superiority in the air, to have superior maneuverability, and to possess suitable weapon systems effectiveness. Light fighters typically achieve a surprise advantage over larger aircraft due to smaller visual and radar signatures, which is important since in the majority of air-to-air kills, the element of surprise is dominant. Their comparative lower cost and higher reliability also allows for greater numbers per budget. Finally, while a single-engine light fighter would typically only carry about half the weapons load of a heavy twin-engine fighter, its surprise and maneuverability advantages often allow it to gain positional advantage to make better use of those weapons. A requirement for low cost and therefore small fighters first arose in the period between World War I and World War II. Examples include several RAF Interceptor designs from the interwar era and French Jockey aircraft of the immediate pre-World War II. None of these very light fighters enjoyed success into World War II, as they were too hampered in performance. Similar to the meaning of lightweight fighter today, during World War II the term small fighter was used to describe a single-engine aircraft of competitive performance, range, and armament load, but with no unnecessary weight and cost. After World War II fighter design moved into the jet era, and many jet fighters basically followed the successful World War II formula of highly efficient mostly single-engine designs that tended to be about half the weight and cost of twin-engine heavy fighters. Prominent early examples include the English Folland Gnat, the American F-86 Sabre and Northrop F-5, the Soviet Mikoyan Mig-15 and Mikoyan Mig-21, the French Mirage 3, and the Swedish Saab Draken. More modern lightweight fighters with competitive air-to-air capability, supersonic aircraft with afterburning engines and modern missile armament, include the American F-16 Fighting Falcon, Swedish JAS-39 Gripen, Indian HAL Tejas, Korean Fa-50, Japanese Mitsubishi F-2, Chinese Chengdu J-10, and Chinese CAC/PAC JF-17 Thunder. The high practical and budgetary effectiveness of modern light fighters for many missions is why the U.S. Air Force adopted both the F-15 Eagle and F-16 in a high/low strategy of both an outstanding but expensive heavy fighter and a lower cost but also outstanding lightweight fighter. The investment to maintain a competitive modern lightweight fighter air force is approximately $90 million to $130 million, $2013, per plane over a 20-year service life, which is approximately half the cost of heavy fighters, so understanding fighter aircraft design trade-offs and combat effectiveness is of national-level strategic importance. Light fighter concepts. Effectiveness advantages. The modern view of lightweight fighters is as a capable weapon intended to satisfy the main criteria of air-to-air combat effectiveness, which in order of importance, are 1. Achieving superiority in the element of surprise, to be aware of the enemy before they are aware of you. In past combats, surprise advantage has been mostly based upon small visual and radar signatures, and having good visibility out of the cockpit. Surprise is a significant advantage, since historically in about 80% of air-to-air kills, the victim was unaware of the attacker until too late. Small fighters like the F-5 with a planform area of about 300 square feet, 28 square meters, or the F-16 at about 400 square feet, 37 square meters, compared to about 1,050 square feet, 98 square meters, for the F-15, have a much lower visual profile. The small fighter is typically invisible to opposing pilots beyond about 4 miles, 6.4 kilometers, whereas a larger fighter such as the F-15 is visible to about 7 miles, 11 kilometers. This is a nonlinear advantage to the light fighter at similar altitude and more if aircraft at different altitudes. Additionally, smaller targets take longer to visually acquire even if they are visible. These two factors together give the light fighter pilot much better statistical odds of seeing the heavy fighter first and setting up a decisive first shot. Once the small fighter sees and turns towards the opponent, its very small frontal area reduces maximum visual detection range to about 2 to 2.5 miles, 3.2 to 4.0 kilometers. Given similar technology, smaller fighters typically have about 2/3 the radar range against the same target as heavy fighters. However, this cannot be counted upon to give the large fighter a winning advantage, as larger fighters with typical radar cross-sectional area of about 10 square meters, 110 square feet, are detectable by a given radar at about 50% farther range than the 2 to 3 square meters, 22 to 32 square feet, cross-section of the light fighter. This approximately balances these trade-offs, and can sometimes favor the lightweight fighter. For example, from the front the F-15 actually presents about 20 square meters, 220 square feet, radar cross-sectional area, and has been typically defeated by opposing F-16 forces not only in close dogfighting combat, but also in extensive beyond visual range, BVR, trials. Also, airborne fighter radars are limited, their coverage is only to the front, and are far from perfect in detecting enemy aircraft. Although radar was extensively used by the United States in the Vietnam War, only 18% of North Vietnamese fighters were first detected by radar, and only 3% by radar on fighter aircraft. The other 82% were visually acquired. The modern trend to stealth aircraft is an attempt to maximize surprise in an era when beyond visual range, BVR, missiles are becoming more effective than the quite low effectiveness BVR has had in the past. 2. To have numerical superiority in the air, which implies the need for lower procurement cost, lower maintenance cost, and higher reliability. Not even taking into account the sometimes superior combat capability of lighter aircraft based on surprise and maneuverability, the pure numbers issue of lower cost and higher reliability, higher sortie rates, also tends to favor light fighters. It is a basic outcome of Lanchester's laws, or the salvo combat model, that a larger number of less sophisticated units will tend to be successful over a smaller number of more advanced ones. The damage dealt is based on the square of the number of units firing, while the quality of those units has only a linear effect on the outcome. This nonlinear relationship favors the light and lightweight fighter. Additionally, as pilot capability is actually the top consideration in maximizing total effectiveness of the pilot aircraft system, the lower purchase and operational cost of light fighters permits more training, thus delivering more effective pilots. For example, as of 2013, total heavy F-15C operating cost is reported at $41,900 per hour, and light F-16C cost at $22,500 per hour. 3. To have superior maneuverability, which in maneuvering combat allows getting into superior position to fire and score the kill. This is a function of achieving lower wing loading, higher thrust-to-weight ratio, and superior aerodynamics. This is sometimes described colloquially as wrapping the smallest possible airframe around the most powerful available engine. Professional analysis through fourth-generation fighters shows that among heavier fighters only the F-15 has been generally competitive with lighter fighters, and its maneuvering performance is exceeded by several lighter fighters such as the F-16. Light fighters have no inherent aerodynamic advantage for speed and range, but when designed to be as simple as possible they do tend to have lower wing loading and higher thrust-to-weight ratio. Additionally, smaller fighters are lower in inertia, allowing a faster transient response in maneuvering combat. 4. Weapon systems effectiveness. This area is one where the light fighter can be at a disadvantage, since the combat load of a single-engine light fighter is typically about half of a twin-engine heavy fighter. However, modern single-engine light fighters such as the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon and the Saab JAS-39 Gripen generally carry similar cannon and air-to-air missile fighter weapons as heavier fighters. Actual aerial combat in the modern era is of short duration, typically about 2 minutes, and as only a small fraction of this is spent actually firing, modest weapons loadouts are generally effective. The ideal weapons load for a modern fighter is considered to be an internal gun and 2 to 4 guided missiles, a load that modern light fighters are fully capable of while maintaining high agility. For example, the JAS-39 Gripen, despite being the lightest major fighter in current production, carries a combat load of an 27mm cannon and up to 6 air-to-air missiles of the same types as carried by heavy fighters. Additionally, combat experience shows that weapons systems' effectiveness has not been dominated by the amount of weaponry or loadout, but by the ability to achieve split-second kills when in position to do so. Concept summary. Superior technology has often been quoted as a strong factor favoring the heavy fighter. The specific argument usually presented is that heavy fighters have superior radar range and longer-range BVR missiles that take advantage of that range. This radar range advantage is one of the major reasons for the existence of the modern heavy fighter, but it has not turned out to be a significant advantage in air combat history to date for several reasons. A major reason has been because long-range BVR missile shots have often been unusable, and often unreliable when they could be taken. The weight of the larger missiles also reduces performance and range needed to get in position to fire. Due to these factors, between 1958 and 1982 in 5 wars there were 2,014 missile firings by fighter pilots engaged in air-to-air combat in 5 wars, but there were only 4 beyond visual range kills. The more general and often misunderstood argument for more technology that has been historically assumed to favor heavy fighters is not just better radar but better systems support for the fighter pilot in other ways as well. Examples include all-weather capability, precise electronic navigation, electronic countermeasures, data linking for improved information awareness, and automation to lighten pilot workload and keep the pilot focused on tasks essential to combat. This was a compelling argument, as the greatest factor in the effectiveness of a fighter plane has always been the pilot. Quoting a prominent reference, throughout the history of air combat, a few outstanding fighter pilots, typically less than 5% of the whole, have run up large scores at the expense of their less gifted brethren. The numerical imbalance was such that a large number of high scorers was needed. The quest was on to turn each fighter pilot into an ace, and technology seemed the easiest, and the only way to achieve it. This was the idea underlying the first 2 American superfighters, the F-14 Tomcat and the F-15 Eagle. While the technology advantage for heavy fighters that better supported the pilot may well have been a valid point in the 1970s, when the F-14 and F-15 first entered service, this advantage has not been maintained over time. Engine performance improvements have improved load carry capability, and with more compact electronics, the lightweight fighter has, from the 1980s onwards, had similar pilot-enhancing technical features. The lightweight fighter carries equally effective weapons including BVR missiles, and has similar combat range and persistence. The modern lightweight fighter achieves these competitive features while still maintaining the classic advantages of better surprise, numbers, and maneuverability. Thus, the lightweight fighter natural advantages have remained in force despite the addition of more technology to air combat. Due to their lower costs, modern light fighters equip the air forces of many smaller nations. However, as budgets have limits for all nations, the optimum selection of fighter aircraft weight, complexity, and cost is an important strategic issue even for wealthy nations. The budgetary and strategic significance of light fighters is illustrated by the defense investment at stake. As an example where well-referenced data is available, though numerous trial and combat references consider the lightweight F-16 to be as good or better on a per plane as the excellent but expensive F-15, fielding and maintaining a light fighter force based on the F-16 is approximately half the cost of the same number of F-15s. The U.S. Air Force reports the total loaded cost per hour, as of 2013, of operating the F-16 to be $22,500 per hour. Numerous authoritative sources report that it takes about 200 to 400 flight hours per year to maintain fighter pilot proficiency. History. Pre-World War II. The original light fighter class stemmed from concern at the growing size and cost of the frontline fighters in the 1920s. One early light fighter project was the French Air Force's Jockey Interceptor program of 1926. Several aircraft, including the Nieuport Delage NID-48 and Amiot 110, were trialed without much success as they offered little over aircraft already in production. In the late 1920s the British issued a specification, F.20/27, for a short-range fast-climbing daylight interceptor. The de Havilland DH.77 and Vickers Jockey monoplanes were among 7 designs tendered to meet the specification, but neither went into production, the heavier but faster biplane Hawker Fury being preferred. Despite the failure of their Jockey program, a return to small fighters was made during the late 1930s as a means to expand France's fleet of aircraft to counter the buildup of the German Air Force. This focused on light wooden fighters that could be built quickly without affecting production of other aircraft. The most numerous of the designs accepted was the Caudetron C.714. Delivery began in early 1940, but only about 90 were built before the fall of France. Although underpowered, it was of necessity used by Polish Air Force pilots serving in France. World War II. There was debate before and during World War II about the optimum size, weight, and number of engines for fighter aircraft. During the war, fighters in the light to middleweight range proved to be the most effective. Properly designed with competitive power to weight and thrust to drag ratios, these aircraft outperformed heavy fighters in combat due to greater surprise and maneuverability. They were also more cost-effective, allowing greater numbers to be deployed as a combat advantage. Some single-engined fighters, including the P-51 Mustang and A6M0, could also match or beat the range of their heavy twin-engined counterparts. Germany. The German Messerschmitt Bf 109 entered service in 1937 and became the most produced fighter in history, with nearly 34,000 built. The design philosophy of the Bf 109 was to wrap a small airframe around a powerful engine using Messerschmitt's lightweight construction principle, which aimed to minimize the weight and number of separate parts in the aircraft. By concentrating wing, engine, and landing gear weight in the firewall, the structure of the Bf 109 could be made relatively light and simple. The Bf 109 was the second smallest major fighter aircraft of World War II and the lightest in the European theater. The E version used in the Battle of Britain had an empty weight of 2,010 kilograms, 4,431 pounds. The more heavily armed and powerful G version used later in the war had an empty weight of 2,700 kilograms, 5,900 pounds. In comparison, its main fighter opponents weighed 2,100 kilograms, 4,640 pounds, to 5,800 kilograms, 12,800 pounds. Japan. The lightest major fighter of World War II was the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 naval fighter. Entering service in 1940 and remaining in use throughout the war, it had an empty weight of 1,680 kilograms, 3,704 pounds, for the A6M2 version, which was extremely light even by the standards of its time. The design team leader, Jiro Horikoshi, intended it to be as light and agile as possible, embodying the qualities of a samurai sword. With Japanese engine technology lagging behind that of the West, but required to outperform Western fighters, the designers minimized weight to maximize range and maneuverability. This was achieved by methods including the use of light weaponry and the absence of armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Early in World War II the Zero was considered the most capable carrier-based fighter in the world, and the extremely long range meant that the Zero could appear in and strike locations where Japanese air power was otherwise not expected to reach. In early combat operations, the Zero gained a reputation as an excellent dogfighter, achieving a kill ratio of 12 to 1. However, Japan was unable to keep improving the aircraft through the war, primarily limited by lagging engine technology, and by mid-1942 a combination of new tactics and the introduction of better aircraft enabled the Allied pilots to engage the Zero on equal or superior terms. For instance, the larger and heavier Grumman F-6F Hellcat had superior performance to the Zero in all aspects other than maneuverability. Combined with the U.S. Navy's superior training standards, units equipped with the type achieved a large victory-to-loss ratio against the Zero and other Japanese aircraft. United Kingdom. The British entered World War II with two modern single-engined fighters forming the majority of the fighter force of the RAF, the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane. Initially introduced as bomber interceptors, both started with 8 machine gun armament but changed to cannon in the course of the war. The Spitfire, designed by R.J. Mitchell, entered service in 1938 and remained in production throughout the war. The empty weight of the Battle of Britain-era Spitfire IIA was 2,142 kilograms, 4,723 pounds, increasing to 2,984 kilograms, 6,578 pounds, in a later variant. It was highly maneuverable and was generally a match for its German opponents. Most Spitfires had a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, but later variants used one of the most powerful engines of the war, the Rolls-Royce Griffon. The Spitfire was produced and improved throughout the war but was complex to build and had limited range. In other respects it was considered an outstanding fighter. The Hawker Hurricane played an important role in the Battle of Britain, but its performance was inferior to the Spitfire and during the war was removed from frontline duty as a fighter and used for ground attack. Production ceased in mid-1944. The Hurricane IIC weighed 2,605 kilograms, 5,745 pounds, empty. United States. On the eve of the war, the United States Army Air Corps contracted for several very light fighter designs based on the Ranger V770 engine, an air-cooled inverted V12 engine, that delivered up to 700 HP. Two prototypes were the Bell XP-77, empty weight 2,855 pounds, 1,295 kilograms, and the Douglas XP-48, empty weight 2,655 pounds, 1,204 kilograms. Problems with the engine and performance and a perceived lack of need saw both programs cancelled. However, they were specifically defined as light or very light fighter aircraft. Realizing the advantages of the P-51's low weight, designers attempted to lower its weight still further while increasing its power. The P-51H of 1944 had an empty weight of 6,586 pounds, 2,987 kilograms. An even lighter J version with reduced armament of 40.50, 12.7 mm, machine guns was tested in April 1945. This had an empty weight of 5,749 pounds, 2,608 kilograms. The planned production run of 1,000 P-51H aircraft was cancelled at the end of the war after 555 were delivered. The J version never entered production. The United States Navy, also made aware of lightweight advantages by combat results, ordered a lighter version of the Grumman F-6F Hellcat, which at 9,238 pounds, 4,190 kilograms, empty weight had limited maneuverability and rate of climb. The planned Grumman F-8F Bearcat replacement used the same engine, but with empty weight reduced to 7,070 pounds, 3,210 kilograms, had excellent performance. It entered production too late to see combat in World War II. Post-war, it equipped 24 fighter squadrons in the Navy and a smaller number in the Marines. The U.S. Navy considered the Bearcat to be the quintessential lightweight fighter. USSR. The Soviet Yakovlev Yak-3, which entered service in 1944, was an attempt to develop the smallest and lightest fighter around the 1,600 HP, 1,200 kilowatts, V12 Klimov M107 engine. As this engine was not available in time, the 1,300 HP, 970 kilowatts, Klimov M105 was substituted, with a resulting empty weight of 2,100 kilograms, 4,640 pounds. Despite the reduced power, the Yak-3 had a top speed of 655 km per hour, 407 miles per hour. The Yak-3 could outturn the German Bf 109 and Fw 190. German pilots were ordered to avoid dogfights with the Yak-3 at low level. The Soviet Yakovlev Yak-9 was also a lightweight fighter, initially using the M105 engine. With an empty weight 2,350 kilograms, 5,170 pounds, it was among the lighter major fighters of World War II. A development of the Yakovlev Yak-7, it entered combat in late 1942 and was the Soviet Union's most produced fighter with 16,769 built. At low altitudes, the Yak-9 was faster and more maneuverable than the Bf 109. However, its armament of one cannon and one machine gun was relatively light. Early light jet fighters. The Luftwaffe's He-162A of 1945 was a very deliberate attempt at producing an effective light jet fighter. It was a low-cost emergency fighter aimed at defending the Third Reich in the late stages of the war. With an empty weight of 1,660 kilograms, 3,660 pounds, it was very light even for the time. The He-162A was powered by a BMW 003 engine. With a top speed of 790 km per hour, 491 miles per hour, at normal thrust at sea level, and 840 km per hour, 522 miles per hour, at 6,000 m, 19,680 feet, it was about 130 km per hour, 80 miles per hour, faster than Allied fighters. Test pilots reported it to be a fine-handling and conceptually well-designed aircraft, and considered its problems to be rushed delivery more than any fundamental design flaws. It never formally entered operational service, and did not receive the benefit of being flown by well-trained pilots using a well-considered operational plan. Only 320 were built, and it scored only a few kills in experimental use before the war ended. The Mikoyan-Gurevich Mig-15 was a Soviet jet fighter developed shortly after World War II. It weighed 3,630 kilograms, 8,003 pounds, empty, and was one of the first successful jet fighters to use swept wings for high transonic speeds. It first saw service in the Chinese Civil War. In combat during the Korean War, it outclassed straight-winged jet day fighters. Some 18,000 were produced. The North American F-86 Sabre, a transonic jet fighter manufactured from 1949, was the United States' first swept-wing fighter. With an empty weight of 5,000 kilograms, 11,000 pounds, it was nearly 40% heavier than the MiG-15, but light compared with today's fighters. The F-86 had a bubble canopy, small size, moderate cost, high maneuverability, and an armament of 6.50 in 13 mm caliber machine guns. It could turn faster than any modern fighter. It saw combat against the MiG-15 in high-speed dogfights during the Korean War. Considered, with the MiG-15, as one of the best fighters in the Korean War, it was the most produced Western jet fighter, with total production of 9,860 units. It continued as a front-line fighter in numerous air forces until 1994. The Folland Gnat was a British private venture design for a light fighter and was the product of Teddy Petter's theories about fighter aircraft design. Although only adopted by the UK as a trainer, the Gnat served successfully as a fighter for the Indian Air Force and was in service from 1959 to 1979. India produced an improved derivative of it, the HAL Ajit. With an empty weight of 2,177 kilograms, 4,800 pounds, it was the lightest successful post-World War II jet fighter, though at the cost of shorter range compared to other fighters. The Gnat is credited as having shot down 7 Pakistani F-86s in the 1965 war, for the loss of 2 Gnats downed by PAF fighters. During the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, Indian Gnats shot down several Pakistani F-86s without loss. The NAT was successful against the capable F-86 flown by well-trained Pakistani pilots because its smaller size allowed a superior level of surprise and greater agility in dogfighting. In the early 1950s, the NATO NBMR won competition for a cheap lightweight tactical strike fighter able to carry conventional or tactical nuclear weapons led to designs including the French Tinquet Spiridure, Brigate Dawn, and Assault Attendard 6, the Italian Air Italia 91 Guaranese and Air Ariete. Other competitors included the Northrop F-5A. The British chose to continue production of the Hawker Hunter, while the French decided to work independently of the competition. Italy produced the Fiat 91 Guaranese while the competition was underway and, in 1957, this was selected as NATO's standard strike fighter. With an empty weight of 3,100 kilograms, 6,830 pounds, it was very light for a jet fighter. The 91 Guaranese entered service with the Italian Air Force in 1961, with the West German Luftwaffe, in 1962, and later with the Portuguese Air Force. It was in production for 19 years, with production ceasing in 1977 with 756 aircraft built. In the mid-1950s, it was realized that fighter costs were escalating to possibly unacceptable levels, and some companies sought to reverse the trend to heavier and more expensive fighters. A prominent result was the Mach 1.3 to Mach 1.6, 4,335 kilograms, 9,558 pounds, Northrop F-5. Smaller, cheaper, and simpler than the contemporary F-4 Phantom, the F-5 had excellent performance and was popular on the export market. It was perhaps the most effective US-produced fighter in the 1960s and early 1970s, with a high sortie rate, low accident rate, high maneuverability, and an effective armament of 20 mm cannon and heat-seeking missiles. Though the United States never procured the F-5 for mainline service, it did adopt it as an opposing forces, UP-4, aggressor for dissimilar training role because of its small size and similarity in performance to the Soviet MiG-21. It also participated in large-scale trials of aircraft and missile effectiveness. In the extensive 9-month-long AIMVAL/ASIVAL trial at Nellis AFB in 1977, the F-5 Red Force was quite effective against the considerably larger F-14 Tomcat naval fighter and F-15 Eagle single-seat fighters making up the Blue Force. These modern aircraft are approximately 5 to 10 times more expensive than the various versions of the F-5. The final result was the F-5 fighting the more modern fighters to an effective plane-for-plane draw. Just under 1,000 of the F-5A Freedom Fighter were sold worldwide, and another 1,400 of the updated F-5E Tiger II version. As of 2016, the F-5 remains in service with many nations. The light middleweight Saab 35 Draken was a second to third generation Mach 2 fighter produced from 1955 to 1974 and in service for 45 years, with empty weights from 6,577 kilograms, 14,500, to 7,440 kilograms, 16,400 pounds. It was a double delta-wing single-engine fighter. Its steeply swept inner delta wing allowed for a high cruise speed. The double delta, with a shallower rake at the outer wing, improved maneuverability. It was designed to be cheap enough for small countries and simple enough to be maintained by conscripted mechanics. Its high acceleration, light wing loading, and extreme maneuverability enabled it to be an excellent dogfighter. However, it had an overly complex fire control system. It remained in service until 2005. The French Dassault Mirage 3 is another late 2ND/early third-generation delta-wing Mach 2 fighter. Stemming from a French requirement for a lightweight all-weather interceptor, it has been in service since 1961. With an empty weight of 7,076 kilograms, 15,600 pounds, in the E version with added ground attack capability, the Mirage 3 is a light fighter by modern standards, though twice as heavy as initial Mirage I. Its maneuverability, modest cost, reliability, and armament of 30 mm cannons and heat-seeking missiles proved effective. It served the French Air Force and was exported to many countries. It performed well for Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967 and Yom Kippur War of 1973. However, Argentina's Mirage IIIs were outperformed by British Sea Harriers during the Falklands War of 1982. Similar in size to the F-5, the Russian Mikoyan-Gurevich Mig-15 entered service in 1959, was prod.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.